Apologies for that. Let me just start and it will hopefully. Welcome to the Inner Space Covent Garden talk. Our event today is how not to let others affect you. You know, whether it's the news and you're hearing things about Israel and Gaza, whether you're hearing things about Ukraine, whether it's something local in your local area, and it does disturb our mind. It does disturb our inner peace. Whether it's the weather, sometimes it's the weather. It's too hot, it's too cold. We don't seem to quite get it right. Something's always bothering us. But it's not something, it's often also other people's behavior that disturbs our inner peace. Do we let their opinions affect what we do in life? Do other people's energies and expectations weigh on us long after the moment has paused? Experience this? People affect us only as much as we let them. Now, we can't control other people's words or behaviors, but we can stop giving people the power to negatively impact our mood and mindset. We've asked our speaker, Pratiba, to share her insights on, firstly, how to break the cycle and not let others affect us. Secondly, develop emotional boundaries, armor, and resilience. And then, thirdly, how to protect our peace, energy, and well being. Pratiba Daya has worked as a systems analyst. She now runs sessions for the corporate staff as well as rural communities on topics that range from mindfulness, empowerment to Ubuntu in South Africa. She's currently based in Johannesburg. Pratiba is going to be sharing with us her insights over the next 40 minutes or so. And after that, she's going to lead us into a guided meditation. The idea of the guided meditation is to take what you've heard and allow it to sink into your heart, into your being, so that you're then able to start using those insights in your life almost immediately. She'll then take your questions, so then please send in your questions via the chat or via the question and answer link, and it'll be my pleasure to put those questions to Pratiba on your behalf. Pratiba, welcome. Over to you.
Evening, Arti, and it's always lovely to be with the Inner Space team and to meet all of you, and just to share some of my own experiences and reflections. It's a very interesting topic. I think it's something that we all, in some way or another, are trying to figure out how do we not get affected by what's happening around us and what is happening by people around us as well. So I want to just begin by, let's just take a moment and reflect on, firstly, on my self-image, because I feel that the image that I hold of myself has a huge role in terms of how other people and situations around me can affect me. So we all conditioned in thinking of ourselves in a particular way. The first conditioning that we have is that we are taught to see ourselves in terms of what we look like, where we come from, what we do, what we own, who we relate to, which political parties we align ourselves with, religion, culture, these various elements or labels that we attach ourselves to has created a kind of an image of ourselves. And this image that we hold of ourselves, then, when it's like a mask that we put in front of ourselves. And if this mask is accepted and appreciated and liked, then I feel great, then I feel happy. But if this mask that I put in front of me is is challenged in any way or is disapproved by people, etc., then that affects me. So we've created a very fragile sense of self because it's built on things that are outside of us. It's built on things that are conditioned to change. What I look like when I was 25 is very different from what I look like now. And so the foundation of my self image has been built on things that are not stable, but are bound to change. And therefore, my sense of worth that I then develop on the basis of that self image will always be challenged. And I would feel vulnerable. These days, not only is it an image of myself that I hold, that I engage with people in an in-person level, but we also hold a virtual persona. And just think about it, that if you don't get those likes and positive emojis on your posts, etc., how does that make you feel, um, you know, as an individual? And that is all because we have now invested in the self. We have invested in an image of myself on things that are outside my control, literally. So to be really develop the method and the approaches and the tools and the practices that we need to really create a stability internally so that I don't get affected is, I feel, begins with firstly starting to establish who am I all and what am I all about. Let's get to know myself on a deeper level. And I've just looked at a few things that I felt that are important to reflect on and to put down as anchors for myself in terms of how I see and relate to myself and how I um, um, understand myself to be, and so that I can be truthful to myself. The first thing that I feel is important is to take time to really ask myself, what are my deeper values? We tend to get very influenced by people around us, influenced by um, what is hype right now in the world around us. We have a lot of so-called influences in the world on social media, etc. And all of these external elements of influence um, denies me that ability to really anchor myself in what brings meaning to me as an individual. And therefore, uh, it's important to take time out and reflect on what are my deeper values. What is it that gives meaning to me as an individual? And so I ask myself, is it compassion? Is it being truthful? Is it being honest? Is it being kind? Is it being sweet? Is it being loving? What is it that I hold as key to how I want to connect with myself? not how I want others to see me, but how I want to connect with myself. That is this the energy that I feel resonates deeply with me? And do I not only see it as a quality or a virtue within me, but as an energy that I want to really cultivate deeply in myself, so that I know that when it comes to a decision, a choice, when it comes to a response to a situation, what guides me in that moment are these values that I have identified as what aligns me with my truth. And so I find that that's an important element. I think it was Pythagoras who, as you entered his school, had it on the archway before you entered, inscribed there, know thyself. Because it's a lifelong journey, and part of that is identifying these deeper values for oneself. I found that when I've had to face challenging situations, um, knowing that these were the values that I stand for, it helped me to navigate through that challenge in a way that I felt I could hold myself with dignity and not feel compromised. I'll give you a simple example. When I was in the corporate environment, I was working in IT, and at some point we had a consulting company that came to help us to develop a certain um, part of the business and new systems that we were going to develop. And the consulting company that came in had a very different set of values. It was very image driven. So you dressed in a particular way, you talked in a particular way, you, you know, created these volumes and volumes of reports in a particular way. And it felt for me very artificial because it was very image driven. And I felt that there was substance that was lacking in there. And so it was an interesting time because I had to ask myself one thing, and that was that, okay, in this environment, there's a lot that I can learn. So to have the humility and to learn and to expand my abilities and my capacities, that was important for me. Uh, but also to have the self-respect and to know that certain things I don't have to take on board, and to be able to discern for myself in a way that what is it that I'm going to absorb and take and learn and grow, and what is it that I know that I'm just going to detach from it and not absorb it. So that discernment sort of was something that got sharpened in that experience that I had in that environment. And what I drew on at that time were my values. My values that human connection is important, respect is important, um, drawing cooperation and helping others feel their own worth, whether they were a clerk or whether they were, someone working in a warehouse, but whoever I interacted to ensure that I engaged with them in a way that upheld their sense of dignity of who they were. So that was important for me, you know, coming back to what my values are and let that guide me. And even if that meant that sometimes I felt a little bit outside the team, it was okay. But I found that sticking to my values and working from that place, at the end of the day, I didn't compromise me. And because I didn't compromise me, there was a deeper sense of self respect. So I grew not only in terms of my intellectual capacities and knowledge base in that environment, but my sense of self respect and self esteem deepened because I work through with my values. Because if we don't have this deeper sense of self, then we oscillate. We oscillate between a superior sense of I or an inferior sense of I. And both those inferior and superior sense of I makes me vulnerable. And it also leads me to feeling affected because the superior sense of I will always be challenged and will always be, in some way or another, be affected by whether others buy into that superiority or not. Um, and very often it can lead to aggressive behavior. And the inferior sense of I will also then get into that space of guilt and shame and always thinking less of the self. So both of these are unhealthy for me. And and until I establish myself in who I am, I will always be oscillating between these two. So taking time to know me. When I also begin to have a deep sense of self, of who I am, um, then what happens as well as a result of that is that then I become less um, affected, but also I have less expectations of others. Um, I feel that, you know, to really hold in my awareness this understanding. And, transformation begins with awareness. So just to hold this awareness within myself, that let me always come back to a place in me which is truthful for myself. Let me always align myself internally with my own deeper value systems. And then the rest is just be an observer of where others are coming from. And I always hold this awareness to help me, and that is people do what they think is best to do in that moment. And I may not think that that is the best thing to do or the most kind response or whatever the case may be, but that's where others are coming from. And reminding myself that it's not about the other, but it's always about me and where am I coming from. If I can establish my internal positioning in a place where I am coming from a place of truthfulness, I'm coming from a place of my own deeper values, then what happens is that I'm able to impact and influence not by trying to force a situation to what I think it needs to be, but I'm able to influence a situation through presence. And that's very different. It's a very different energy that I then begin to work with. And it's a quieter energy, but it's equally powerful. Um, I want to share an example of this. And that was, I think it was in 20, 2012 or 2013, around that time. And we had the racism conference in South Africa, in Durban at that time. And it was a highly charged conference, as you can imagine. And at that time, Kofi Annan was the Secretary General of the United Nations. Um, and there was a event that he was present and engaging with civil society. And after he gave his input, there was opportunity for members of various civil society organizations to ask questions. And so people were asking questions, and like every situation, there's always time running short. And so there was an individual who really wanted his question to be asked. And so he started shouting and performing and creating a bit of uproar. And Kofi Annan just looked at him very directly and in a very calm and clear voice just said, "We are all here to find solutions, and we have to respond to each other with maturity, and this kind of behavior will not be tolerated." And there was just like a hushed silence. And it was like it was a presence that impacted that atmosphere and impacted that moment. And so I it left a very deep impression in me, because I think so often we try to control and we try to impact, and we try to do this by using very um, external, or we think the louder we are, the more we will be heard. But actually, it's that stability inside, being very clear where I'm coming from, being very stable from where I'm coming from, and then responding from that stability. And that creates that impact. So that for me has been a very important foundation, in a sense, um, that to always know that it starts with me, and it's where I choose to be and where I position myself to be. So the next thing that I found that as a tool and as a practice that is important, and I think what helps me to create this internal foundation of stability, um, is the practice of meditation. Um, what happens to us is that very often when we see things happening, okay, for example, the wars that are happening in the world. I grew up at a time when apartheid was around, and there was so much of violence at that time as well. So these aspects that, or events, situations that are occurring, do tug at our hearts, because they challenge, or they maybe trigger our own sense of justice and value for human life, and those aspects. And so, therefore, they do affect us because they tug at our hearts, and naturally they do so. But what I've learned to work with, and that is that I find that when a situation like that, where I have very little direct impact, there's very little that I can physically directly do. And often it's because I feel helpless that I end up feeling so affected by the things that are happening. So whether it's the economy, whether it's the weather, whether it's the wars, but because I feel so helpless, that is why I feel so affected. And what I've sort of learned to do in a way, and that is that to look at the world not only from a physical plane, but to begin to look at the world that there's that spiritual plane as well. Um, and to just understand where I'm coming from. It's like you and I, we see each other, we connect with each other, we can speak to each other and listen to each other, etc. But beyond that physical interaction that we have with each other, it's like we feel each other before we even hear each other. We feel each other's vibrations, and that's very real. So that's the spiritual dimension, that beyond the physical, there's that subtle vibrational presence that we all are. And so I feel in these times when physically sometimes we can't do things, um, it's so important to know that at that more subtle level, at that level of vibration, I can impact. I can send vibrations of peace. I can send vibrations of love and light. I can just send vibrations of just a sense of love to all. So when I can engage in something, um, it takes me away from that feeling of helplessness. And so, as long so when I'm engaged in something that is positive, that's empowering, that is peaceful, that is aligned with my deeper values, then that helps me not to feel so affected as well. So I use meditation as a tool. And the first thing I use meditation is to help me ground myself in who I am and anchor myself in who I am. So I see myself beyond the physical labels that I give myself. And I see myself as a soul, as consciousness, as a being of um, subtle energy. And I give myself that space to, bring my thoughts to become more quiet and to connect with my inner self in terms of my inner qualities, my inner quality of peace, which is an inherent quality within me, my inner quality of love, um, or joy, these innate human qualities that are in all of us. I give myself that space to reconnect with that vibration that I am. So it's not just thinking I am this, but giving myself that space to feel that energy that I am. Because my reality is based on my experience. And if we let our experience be completely only driven by our senses, by the physical uh, materialism around us, then that is where I will be, you know, um, investing my power in. And we know that that world is a very uh, it keeps changing, it's not stable. But when I invest in connecting with my inner self and connecting with those inner qualities within me, giving myself that space of experience, then that experience then becomes a power within me that I can then draw on and draw from. So I learned to live from the inside out rather than the outside in. And when I live from that inside out, I'm able to impact and affect the outside in a more positive way. Um, a little example I want to share, a personal experience, and that was when I was working in IT. Um, I was working in an industry called the Building Industrial Council. And in South Africa, a lot of the people in the building industry were semi-skilled or unskilled laborers, and they came from the rural areas into the cities for work. And so they would contribute to a fund, and their employers will contribute to a fund. And so this Building Industrial Council would actually collect these funds so that at the end of the year, they would get a holiday paycheck. And also, it would take care of their medical aid and stuff like that. So, my job in this organization was to write the programs that would provide that holiday paycheck at the end of the year. And for some odd reason, there were changes to the programs that were made. And the night that we had to run these programs, the program crashed. And so, of course, it was just myself and my boss at that time, who was the financial director. So it increased a little bit of the tension, and I was the only technical person at that time within the organization that could deal with it. Um, and so there was a bit of tension, and I said, "Oh, it doesn't look too serious." I went into my programs, tried to resolve it. We ran the program, and after 15 minutes, it crashed again. By now, the tension was mounting. And she was becoming anxious because she was a very hands on person, but this was something she couldn't dive into and fix herself. She had to rely on me. And I had already been meditating for a while at that time. And so I told myself, Pratiba, just stay calm. And it wasn't like I could tell her I need to meditate now, but I just told myself, just stay calm. And because there had been a practice for a few years of meditation, it was like calm wasn't just a word, but calm was an experience. It was an energy that I held within myself. And so when I said just be calm, it was like I was able to draw that calmness from deep within my consciousness into my being. And so my mind remained quiet and I could focus. My emotions stayed cool and I could concentrate and there was no panic. And after half an hour or so, I was able to resolve the issue. But that evening also gave me another experience, and that was that not only did I become calm, but the anxiety that was around me didn't affect me. Literally, my experience was that it was like the anxiety of my manager at that time, it was like could not penetrate this calmness that I felt inside of me. And so, the expression like water off a duck's back, that's exactly how I felt. It did not penetrate. So that's where I see where this consistent practice of taking time to really become quiet and still, using meditation as a tool to come back to your true essence of who you are and really stabilize yourself in this energy that you are, not idea of yourself, not an image of yourself, but the energy that I am, and really feel yourself anchored in that, even if it's just a momentary experience that you're having during your meditation. It's an accumulation that's occurring, and through that accumulation, then you begin to find that when you need to draw on it, you are able to draw on it. So that's one important practice that I do is always giving myself that time to go inwards, to connect inwards, and to, fill myself with that deeper experience of stillness within and peace within. The second practice that I find that is useful. And that is also to learn to change my vision of the other. I learned to first see myself as consciousness, as a soul. And the second thing I do is that I learn to see the other as consciousness, a soul as well. And particularly in the environment that I have grown up in, it has been a very important practice to go beyond this outer shield or this outer image, and to know that what I'm seeing is beyond the skin, what I'm relating to is beyond the skin, that there is a consciousness there, and that consciousness has the capacity to be loving, to be peaceful, to be light, to be joyful. So just as I am my original nature, inherent nature, as a soul is these qualities, I practice very consciously to see the other in the same light. And what happens, as I mentioned earlier, that we feel each other before we even can hear each other. So the awareness I hold and the kind of vision that I then begin to create of the other when I'm relating to the other, it's like that's the energy that I draw out of that individual. So instead of reacting to personality, because that's what happens is that we have a particular personality, and each one of us, sometimes our personalities clash, but our personalities are personalities that we have acquired as a way of navigating through circumstances. But beneath the personality is this inherent energy of goodness. The inherent energy of the soul is there. And so the more I consciously practice in reminding myself that that is what I need to relate to, the less affected I feel by people's habits, by people's personalities. I just see it as them, playing a game. And it's like, let them play their game. Um, I can, I need to always ask myself, what game is it that I want to play? Where is it that I want to come from? And how truthful am I being to where I'm coming from? So I find that that's an important practice that is very useful. So it helps me then also to know that when is it that I need to sometimes, um, you know, uh, discern as to what I'm going to absorb, and when is it that I need to just watch and let go and just see it as a game, not to absorb it. So that's the refinement that gets created in my own intellect the more that I begin this practice, because it's always like I need to um, focus on what is real and meaningful, and not the superficiality that comes between us, but what is real and meaningful. And that's what I want to focus on. That's what I want to give energy to. And that's what I want to relate to. And the last aspect that I wanted to share as well, and that is that it's also to take time in my meditation that I connect with the divine. I find that it's through the connection with the divine that I begin to give myself that opportunity to experience love. Love that's not conditional, love that's very subtle and very pure. And it's that experience of love that actually um, fills me with a deep sense of contentment. And for me, contentment is the yardstick of my own growth and progress. And when I'm content, I'm not then taking from things outside of me, because as long as I'm taking from things outside of me, I will be affected by things outside of me. So, really, as I fill myself with this feeling of being loved and knowing that I'm worthy of that love, and experiencing that subtle love as I connect with the divine through my meditation, that helps me to remain very stable within and full and content within. And that contentment then allows me just to flow with what's happening. And I feel that that experience of love then also guides me um, in a way so that I I remain light, I remain positive, and that I can transcend chaos rather than try to fix chaos, but rather to transcend the chaos. So, yeah, these were some of my thoughts that I wanted to share with you all this evening. And I think I'll lead it into a short meditation now, just so that some of these concepts that I've shared, you can connect with it at the level of feeling. Okay. So I invite you to just sit comfortably upright and take in a deep breath, and slowly breathe out, allowing your out breath to be longer than your in breath. And with each breath, just feel your body relaxing. Feel your shoulders dropping. Just feel your body sinking into the chair that you're sitting on. And just feel a sense of calm wash over you as you allow yourself to relax. And for a moment now, I invite you to take your attention away from your environment and just begin to look inwards. Become more conscious and aware of your inner world. And for now, just ask yourself the question, how content am I feeling? Does my heart feel full? Or is there anything that's pulling me or tugging at me? And so I invite you for this moment just to tell yourself, for this moment, for this time, I'm okay. And everything is okay. That beneath the layers of that which creates discontentment in any way, beneath that layer, there's a sacred part within me That part is light and love. The intrinsic qualities of the soul. And I give myself permission in this moment to embrace that part of me, that I am peace. That is my true nature. And so it allows me to feel that quality of peace within, a deep stillness, a stillness that's anchored in truth, anchored in a part of me that feels meaningful and real. And sacred. And so I just allow myself to rest in that awareness of who I am as consciousness, as light, as peace. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pratiba, for sharing your insights. I found the whole idea of questioning my expectations of others and how that really does impact me, not just them, but me. So thank you for that. And the exercises just took us through a meditation exercise that allowed our minds to become a quieter. So thank you very, very much. Few questions have come in. The first one is, how can we not let others affect us, particularly if we live with them or they're members of our family?
That's always an interesting one, isn't it? Because the people you're closest to are the ones that tend to affect us the most. I think one thing that has helped me is that people that we are closest to, we tend to find fault in them a lot because we have more expectations of them. It's almost like because they are my so and so, so we have that relationship based on familiarity of one form or another. And what I found as an exercise, and you can experiment this, is that sit down and just write down everything that you see in them that you are grateful for. So that I'm changing my mindset from a mindset of criticism or being critical to a mindset of appreciation. And as I do that, then you begin to find that you get less and less affected by others because that expectation of the other is what's affecting you. So, to undo that, appreciate more than expect.
That's interesting because it leads us into the next question. Do you recommend any tips on how to stop being self-critical?
Mm. Yeah, very often our criticisms of others is because we are self-critical. And I think for me, what I have done is that I have worked on it on two levels. One is that I have looked at the things that trigger my self criticisms. And very often I've seen that it's because of experiences in the past that I've had to navigate. And so I reacted in particular ways that at the end of the day, I felt unhappy with myself. And to practice self compassion, and what I mean by this is that when I recognize behaviors that I had adopted as a way of coping, um, I now talk to myself and I tell myself, I understand where this comes from, but it's not needed anymore. So I don't sort of hold a grudging or a harsh attitude towards myself, but talk to myself with kindness and understanding as to where that behavior came from, so that I can really hold myself with that kind of compassion and understanding and love and kindness towards myself, and encouraging myself to go beyond that particular habit or behavior that I find that I engage in that brings me down. So it's like being compassionate with the self and kind to the self. And it's almost like looking at the self um, as a child. And how would you talk to a child? To be gentle, to encourage, and to nurture that child so that that child grows out of that old habit. So that's the approach I have used to work through self-criticism.
Thank you. The next person is saying, I'm a bit confused about how having low expectations is a good thing. Do you mean low expectations or less expectations?
I think no expectations actually, because when I have any form of expectation, um, I I'm investing in that person in a way that I'm wanting them something from them. And that then begins to affect me. It will affect me in one way or another. So I just found that communication is important in terms of how we want to engage with each other, that we can share where we're coming from, and share responsibilities or whatever. But in my mind, I've also have worked with that. If I have an expectation, then I find that my energy can drop very easily. So what I have done for myself, and that is that I will communicate, but then I will keep moving forward and not letting the behavior of the other, and whether they fulfill their side of it or not, um, be the issue. When they don't do what they promise, then I would say, well, this is what you promised, but let's see how we can work around this now. How can we move forward with this? So I find that, when we have expectations as well, and we react because the expectation is not fulfilled, very often, even the tone of our voice um, makes the other feel guilty. And that guilt then usually results in them becoming defensive. So then it doesn't serve purpose anymore, then, it doesn't resolve the situation. So what I have been practicing, not that I get it right every time, but I highlight where anything that, they were accountable for that they didn't do, and say, okay, how can we work around this? How can I help you? How can we find a resolution towards this, making sure that it's not coming with the feeling of, I told you to do this, or you were supposed to do this, or, keeping that kind of aggressiveness out of it. So it's a practice, and I'm finding that it's just helping the other to become more accountable, and it's having a positive impact. Yeah.
Interesting, interesting. How does that apply? Now, the next question is when you have a boss that's very difficult and you have to accept the unacceptable behavior, should you be accepting unacceptable behavior, I guess? Or is there another direction?
Let me just take a sip of water quickly. I think boundaries are very important. And I think I learned about boundaries in a way when I realized that if I don't have boundaries, it doesn't serve me, nor does it serve the other. And so communication is important to set that boundary. And if you can't communicate directly to your boss, then I think it is important to approach someone who is a mediator to help to create a healthy boundary in that regard. Because the more you don't create that healthy boundary, the more it begins to impact you, but it doesn't help the other. Boundaries are not about self-preservation, it's about creating respect in the relationship. And when there's respect in the relationship, then both grow in the relationship.
That's a beautiful description. Somebody's asking, how can I discover or know my values?
Sit down quietly. And I think an exercise that helped me, and that's just a start, but it refines itself with time. And look at your life's journey and look at the high moments in your life and also look at the low moments in your life and see that in those high moments, what took you to those high moments? And when you were in your low moments, what lifted you out of those low moments? And you'll begin to see certain patterns coming out of certain value systems that you were either protecting or that supported you or that gave you a sense of direction when things around you seemed very confusing. So it's a bit of a reflection on your own journey that will give you clues to what your values are for you.
And finally, the question I'd like to put to you is what's the difference between meditation and manifestation?
Meditation for me is really becoming still, connecting with my deeper sense of self, connecting with the divine, allowing myself to be realigned with my intrinsic qualities. And when I meditate in that way, it's about just becoming and feeling a sense of inner wholeness. And very often, when I am aligned internally, then the quality of my thinking becomes very clear and selfless as well, in a way. It's like thinking that serves rather than thinking that desires. And for me, then, when there's that quality of thinking that is happening, then that begins to manifest things in a very natural way. So I don't necessarily work on trying to manifest things, but I feel I work more on becoming more clear and clean and internally connected. And then the right thoughts come into the mind, which then has the right energy. And I begin to see how that energy then begins to play itself out and manifest things. So, manifestation is a result of a pure, clean intention and mind. But meditation is to create that pure, clean mind and heart.
Thank you so much, Pratiba. There are other questions, and I'm going to say to everybody, thank you for all the questions that have come in, but we have hit at the end of our event today.